Alright, welcome to the Strange North channel. I'm coming to you from a heat wave in the city of Edmonton, Alberta. My place is so hot right now, I do not have air conditioning, and I know a lot of you don't either. And so we're definitely suffering together today, but I heard a wise man once say that life is suffering. I heard this in the late 90s, I'm not sure who said it, I think it was Ja Rule. But I wanted to tell you the story of a Toronto firefighter who disappeared in the United States and then reappeared in a bizarre location about a week later. And I'm just going to jump right into the story. So Constantinos Filippidis, otherwise known as Danny, was a 49-year-old captain with the Toronto Fire Services. Danny was married with 2 children and he was a well-loved member of the community. And in 2018, he was on his annual skiing trip with colleagues from the Toronto Fire Services at Lake Placid, New York. They were skiing on Whiteface Mountain, which is one of the highest peaks in the Adirondacks. And so on February 7th of 2018, this was the last day of their trip, Danny told his friends that he had forgotten to bring his camera and that he was going to ski down the mountain to his car to retrieve it and then return to his friends so he could document the end of their trip. However, there were early accounts that did not mention the camera business. The report said that Danny was skiing with a friend and that his friend became fatigued and Danny decided to go on alone and ski down the mountain. At any rate, his friends were waiting for him at the main lodge, which was halfway up the mountain, until the facilities closed at 4 p.m. that day. And during this time, there was a big snowstorm that was developing. When Danny still hadn't met up with his friends at 4:30 p.m. that day, he was reported missing. The group then returned to the resort where they were staying, and Danny's car, phone, passport, and identification were exactly where they had been left. His friends started searching the mountain, and they were soon assisted by forest rangers, ski patrol, and other skiers in this area. And as they were searching, the weather got worse and worse as the evening progressed. The next day, on February 8th, the search intensified. Pretty soon, Homeland Security, U.S. border officials, and a bunch of other volunteers were helping in the search. Danny's wife flew to New York to help with the search. Additionally, over 100 Toronto firefighters flew to the area to help search for their colleague. Helicopters, drones, and sniffer dogs were all used in the search, and no scent trail was ever detected. Over the next 6 days, about 6,000 people in total participated in the search for Danny Filippidis. Searchers could find no sign of this man, and of course people were getting very worried. And then 6 days after he went missing, on the morning of Tuesday, February 13th, Danny's wife is meeting with the search party in Lake Placid, and she got a call from an unknown number, and it turned out to be Danny. He said that he was at the Sacramento airport in California, and this is over 4,600 kilometers away on the opposite side of the North American continent. She told him to call 911 to get assistance, and he called police immediately. When Sacramento police arrived at the airport, they quickly found Danny at the airport's car rental terminal. And he was wearing the same clothes that he went missing in. He was even carrying his ski helmet. Apparently he was in a confused state. He had a new iPhone, about $1,000 in cash, a credit card, and he even had a fresh haircut. When police asked him how he got to Sacramento, he said that his memories were cloudy and that he thought he'd suffered a head injury. But he said that he rode in a big truck and he slept a lot. Initially, he told police that he wasn't even sure how he got the phone to call his wife. He was immediately taken to hospital to be treated for head trauma, but he was quickly discharged because he had no reported signs of injuries. Sergeant Sean Hampton of the Sacramento County Sheriff's Office said that they didn't believe Danny was impaired by drugs and alcohol after spending an extended period of time with him. They thought that he was dropped off in Sacramento the night before calling for help and that he had slept on the streets near Richards Boulevard along the Interstate 5 corridor. Police would distribute a bulletin with a picture of Danny across the country in the hopes that someone with information on what happened to him would come forward. A couple days later, Danny returned to the Adirondacks for police questioning and then quickly returned to Toronto and returned to his job as a captain with the Toronto Fire Department. And then about 6 months later, Danny would give an interview to the press. In this interview, he said that doctors told him that he indeed had a head injury, even though when he was initially looked at the hospital, they told him he had no signs of injury. He also said that he believes that he made a wrong turn as he was heading down the mountain and that he thought he made his way to the main lodge, but actually he made his way to the kids' lodge. Danny claims that at some point he hailed a truck at the mountain to get a ride back to town, but that his memories were pretty foggy during the time that he was missing. He remembers driving in a big rig style truck. He said at one point he was told that they were driving through Utah. He also remembered being sick on the side of the road near a truck stop, and he talked about having a terrible headache and intense fatigue and that he slept most of the time that he was in this truck. And he said that at the end of this journey, the truck driver dropped him off in Sacramento, California, telling him that this was the end of the line. And to this day, this truck driver's identity has never been discovered. It also seems strange that the truck driver at no point tried to get Danny help or notify the authorities, that he simply picked up this guy in this really confused state and drove him all the way to California. It was reported that Danny took out $1,000 cash to buy a new phone, but it was also reported that the Firefighters Association claimed that none of his bank cards were ever used. And if he did take out that money, why did this cash withdrawal not trigger police? Danny said that when he arrived in Sacramento, he couldn't remember his wife's phone number, but he looked up Whiteface Mountain online and saw that he was a missing person. He then decided to sleep on the streets that night, and then the next morning he got a ride to the Sacramento airport for some reason, where he remembered his wife's number. There's a Toronto brain surgeon named Dr. Charles Tater that thinks that Danny possibly suffered amnesia as a result of concussion. But Dr. Tater also said that memory loss resulting from a concussion usually lasts a couple days, and so this days-long episode was very unusual. And then Dr. Jennifer Ryan, who is a senior scientist at Rotman Research Institute at Baycrest in Toronto, thought that Danny was probably experiencing a dissociative fugue state, where people basically forget who they are and sometimes even assume a new identity, and this can take place over the course of many days. And often when people are in this state, they snap back to reality when they find themselves in unfamiliar territory. And so these specialists in Toronto gave very plausible and reasonable explanations as to what could have happened to Danny, although nobody really knows for sure what happened to him, and the story remains inconclusive. And that pretty much wraps up this video, and as you can see, it's a fairly bizarre case, and some of the details of the story just don't make a lot of sense. I mean, first off, in between the time that he was dropped off by the trucker in Sacramento and then called his wife, he somehow managed to get a fresh haircut, and that just doesn't make a lot of sense. I also wonder why he went through all the trouble of buying a brand new cell phone to call his wife rather than borrowing a phone or using a payphone. And he even said that he had trouble buying a phone without ID at a couple places, so why did he go through all that trouble? I also find it bizarre that a trucker even picked Danny up in the first place. I mean, why would this trucker pick up this disoriented guy and take him all the way to Sacramento? Why wouldn't he try to bring him to a hospital or try to arrange some sort of help? I also wonder if Danny actually traveled in one vehicle from Lake Placid to Sacramento. That's a long distance, and it pretty much traverses the entire continent. And so I wonder if maybe he transferred vehicles at some point. It's also unusual that when Danny was originally taken to a hospital, the doctor said that it didn't appear that he had a head injury. But when he was inspected later on, the doctor said, yeah, it looks like you have a head injury and maybe experienced some sort of amnesia or fugue state. But ultimately, there's just very limited information about this case. And fortunately, Danny was found safe and the story has a happy ending. And to me, this was just one of the more bizarre missing persons cases that has happened in the past number of years. And I figured you'd find this intriguing if you hadn't heard about this story. I hope you found this interesting and informative, and if you'd like to watch more of my content in general, please consider subscribing to my channel. I upload at least one new video per week. Thank you for watching, I hope you have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Strange North channel.